Hi, Waj de Bruin here. This documentary is about the fascinating life of Cecil Barkon, that highly influential but sadly these days unknown photographer. The documentary was made for the CBS company that is the Canine Bear Experience by Enri and myself. I hope you enjoy this fascinating exposé. Cecil Barkon was born of a mixed marriage in Barking, Essex sometime around the war years. He knew tragedy early and never knew his father, who it is reputed was on the road all his life and homeless and never knew Cecil ever existed. Shortly after his birth, his mother Lady was the victim of a tragic hit and run on the A13. Cecil was put up for adoption and spent some time in the Battersea Dogs home before he was adopted by Johnny Cosmo through Sington Smythe Barkon of the Berkshire Smythe Barkons. A troubled pup, Cecil was soon in trouble with the law, public urination, loud behavior, etc. But Cosmo believed in the young pup and gave him his first camera. An old box brownie as a chew toy. But Cecil had other as yet unrealized ambitions. He stole his first good camera. A pre-war Leica. From a drunk American soldier. And from that moment on he documented everything. Rarely did Barkon work in color, and in the few example we have it shows that he was not overly fond of that medium. He had stated on many occasions that he felt he got more clarity in monochrome. In Prayer 1954, Barkon shows a young Alberto Sorda thanking God for his screen success. The blurred effect and washed out colors used give the portrait a quasi-religious look, which is compounded by the look Barkon has caught in Sorda's eyes. The adoration of the Lord is caught in Sorda's shiny cheeks, and his purity is reflected in his white shirt. His hands in prayer, Sorda makes it clear he is searching for redemption.
Firsta meta Mr. Barkon in Canin 55. Punto funny story ves viv Sophie Loren Bridge and this dog van stacking Galia against pover Polly Veneside. Marcello. Overere. Virgolette Saivat. E allonged. Ants no payman Sophie. Next month it was front cover. Lief magazine musta phodographer mundred softimes after that. Virgolette Butman. That guns personal habits very habit of you sign. Punt in te and his photographs are legakian spec for him.
1958's concern captures a woman keening to the side, worried concern, maybe even lost, her hair not quite immaculate, her eyes slightly dead, her lips tight, makeup even and heavy. We can but wonder what is causing her grief: a lost child, divorce, maybe even death, or perhaps the more mundane happenstance of missing a bus. Barkon never tells us, but her grief is manifest for all to see.
In his 1959 show, incarcerated Barkon concentrated on a number of grotesqueries of the criminal classes: grim humor, lost fingers, bad tattoos, scars and soulless eyes, and then there were a number almost homoerotic pics, pecs, flexed muscles, the wayward and the lost. You can almost smell the sweat and cheap cigarettes. The most famous of these was 1958's Banged Up. After this exhibition, rumors regarding Cecil's sexuality started to circulate. Though he was always accompanied by a pack of females he called in those pre-PC times his yapping bitches, he was noted to have taken up a real interest in Steve Reeves' gladiator pictures and would attend any theater that showed them. These rumors ceased after 1961's many paternity cases that are said to arise because of his licentious and libertine lifestyle.
After moving to the continent, Cecil immersed himself in the jazz scene, and his pictures appeared on album covers, posters and in jazz mags throughout the late 50s and early 60s. In addition to this straight photography, Cecil took a number of art pics which he described as an attempt to bring the feeling of sound to the paper, to capture the feel and heat of the man. Cecil rarely exhibited these pictures as they were. The opposite of his controlled snaps as a paparazzi and as a commercial photographer. He was concerned that art may destroy the lucrative business he had created for himself. After his disappearance in the late 60s, the most common critique applied to Cecil's work was that he had sold out and had abandoned art for money. Cecil himself addressed this very question when he told Playboy magazine in early '59, "What's a dog without a bone?" in 1957's portrait of Columbia Gumberelloden. He came as close as possible to achieving his ambition.
In 1962, Barkon's work took a darker theme with many elements of the occult or Satanist ephemera showing in his work. The photograph Lil Drummer Girl from his '62 Paris show Beauté est Mort shows clearly the artistic direction Barkon's work was moving it at this time. Some say it was a response to heightening East-West conflict that led him down this dark path. It is my opinion, however, that it was the drudge of his commercial work that had driven him to deeper and darker subjects. The Beauté est Mort show was reviled in Paris by critics for its unrelenting pessimism and its absence of light. Some said his deft touch had deserted him, some that the paternity suits had weighed him down, and others said that his obsession with watching every episode of The Littlest Hobo had taken away his mind. Whatever the truth, it was the beginning of the end for Barkon, and his commercial work dried up as he became increasingly under the spell of Eastern mysticism. From the simple street images of Southend-on-Sea at the end of the war and post-war austerity to the glitz and glamour of Paris and Cannes of the 50s and early 60s, Cecil quickly made a name for himself as having an exceptional eye. His eccentricities, such as keeping his nails long and the occasional baying or howling at the moon, were taken as mere quirks by the euphoric post-war Parisians. He dogged around the bars and brothels and jazz clubs of Paris, living a sybaritic and libertine existence, but even bohemian wolves have to make a living, and Cecil was drawn to advertising and pursued a parallel career in the dark art of persuasion that was often at odds and sometimes strangely congruent to his artistic endeavors. What were once considered a mere bluff bump for bluster are now being re-evaluated as being almost subversive example of the nascent counterculture, as if Cecil sought to bite the hand that fed him. U.S. Steel was one of his major clients, and Cecil probably played straighter with them than with most. 1958's stealing business adverts not so obliquely referred that company's monopolistic exploits in the early part of the 20th century. His 1961 campaign for Airy, the first commercially available mace spray, was considered by some to be too jokey for such a serious subject, but sales increased by 500% during the life of the campaign. Revlon loved his Only Your Feet Should Run stance, which was released during the 1956 Melbourne Olympic Games, while those hipsters laughed at his campaign for Sappho champagne. Wine from the Sappho island of Greece struggled to get past the image of being undrinkable Resina, yet the campaigns ought overtake Campari as the drink of the hip crowd in 1959. His work for the U.S. Shovel and Pick Company was made at the time of the Richard Nixon Vicuna coat scandal and was resurrected many years later at the time of that same president's impeachment hearings. An example of the timeless nature of his work, but perhaps the most controversial of all his work was his Ronson Fast Light cigarette lighter campaign of 1961. Europe, especially Germany and Italy, were suffering a large increase in illegitimate births, which was put down to the US and British armies of occupation and soldiers doing what soldiers have always done. The backlash against this campaign by churches was relentless and did more to make a success of the campaign, as Cecil himself admitted, than his bad joke could ever do. Ultimately, though, the struggle between art and artifice, between critical acclaim and commercial success, drove Cecil away from all that he loved and sent him of his final spiritual quest, from which he never returned.
Perhaps the last great show of Cecil's career was Backstage in 1964. He had already left Paris by this stage, and it was put on by his good friend Wojciech de Bruin, then a student at Bear Academe d'Art. The pictures showed a rather jaded look at the showgirls and pimps of Paris, and was considered gritty and rather gauche by the scene makers of 1964, but these images remain some of Cecil's finest or masterpieces of his canine canon. The deliberate blurred images on 63's The Women covers the women like bad and smudged makeup, while the mirror images in the Mirror 1 and Mirror 2 hint at almost unbearable sadness. And then the late masterpiece Follies. The chubby aging dancer and the black-shirted pimp engaging in what is most likely meaningless discussion while surrounded by the sad ennui of existence. Life at its cruelest and saddest as we wonder what price entertainment. Perhaps this was the shot that inspired Cecil to give it all up. Some critics have argued that in The Pimp we see Cecil himself finally coming to grips with what life was. Finally succumbing to the realization one cannot serve art and mammon. Maybe this is the perfect exit to leave the stage. Perhaps the only one he had left. We all hope that Cecil found what he was looking for, or at least lived life to the full as he had always done. It is our hope for him and his work, his legacy for us, for our lost dreams.
Hey, pass that key on to you French motherfucker. G-man wearing a beret and a striped t-shirt doesn't make you an artist, it makes you Marcel fucking Marceau. Mother, what was I saying? Yeah, art. Is it art? Fucked if I know, man. But gee, these Gaulois are rough. Haven't you mute the fuck has ever had of players? What was I saying? Man, I just point the box at some shit and say smile, that's the magic. No. Sometimes I am like a dog. Yeah, dog, with AGs. What are those things? It was on the tip of my tongue. Yeah, a dog with a bone. Here's a tip for free, man. Stay away from the green fairy. That shit will really fuck you up. Yeah, I photographed them all. Belmondo, Brando, Brezhnez, Bridget, Lassie. Fuck, man, have you heard the new Sun Ra record? Wild, man. Just wild. Far out. Past Pluto, man. We dogs been sniffing round Uranus forever, man. Can you dig it? Garcon. Hey, you French mother, more wine. Vino. Capuche. Ah, one day, I'm gonna hit the road. Kathmandu. But I digress.
The last known photograph by Barkon is the rather disturbing The Bitter End, a candid snap taken just before he headed east. He took the picture of the sad end of two mafiosi in his rather swank Milano hotel, and after it was published, Cecil Barkon went on his spiritual journey and was never heard from again. Despite rumors, the best information available suggests that Barkon finished his days as he had started. A restless soul on the road, an enjoyer of life. After all, his art grew from his presence and not the other way around. Barkon was a legend, and his legacy of photography lives on, especially in these days of the World Wide Web where many of a selfie and photo look like they have been taken by a dog. Lately though, there has been a reappraisal of Barkon's oeuvre and even an acknowledgement of his art in his hometown of Barking, UK, where the local paper has been running a series of articles arising out of a sneak peek at the earlier cut of this documentary. On behalf of the producers and Ryan Conula and Wojciech de Bruin, I would like to encourage you to keep the name of Cecil Barkon and his legacy alive.
After 1963, little is known about Cecil. He told friends he was going to see the world and was last seen heading east with copies of On the Road and Lost Horizon in his pack. Tellingly, he did not take a camera. Perhaps it is best that the world remembers Barkon through the images that he created. Images that will always inspire. Perhaps it was put best by his friend, the poet Wolfhound, who wrote in his masterwork, "What are lampposts for? Gone. Gone. He may be, but I will always pause as I pass the post outside his house. And remember, his bark worse than his bite."